Hello everyone, welcome to HFY Beyond Terror. This channel is all about HFY and sci-fi stories, where humanity's underestimated and then proves
the galley smelled like scorched oil and yesterday's hopes. Mara Vance scraped carbon off the induction griddle with a steel spatula, the sound sharp as a reprimand in the empty room. The last customer had left an hour ago, polite and unimpressed. And the dining nook 6 tables bolted to the floor for station safety looked like a showroom nobody visited anymore. On Lagrange Station 9, there were 13,000 residents and more ways to eat than to breathe. Nutrient mist kiosks, printed meal bars, flavor streams that tricked your tongue with calibrated aerosols. Mara's Place Old Light. Served food you could chew, smell, remember. Food that took time. Today, 3 people had wanted that. 3. She dumped the rinse water into the reclamation sink wrongly labeled recycling by some administrator, who'd never cleaned a kitchen in their life, hung her apron on its hook, and stared for a beat. At the menu board she'd hand-lettered in chalk. Her handwriting was starting to look tired. She killed the overheads and turned to lock up. The service hatch rattled. Mara froze. Deliveries didn't come after shift change. Station security didn't knock. And no customer came around back unless they were lost or drunk. The hatch rattled again harder. Metal on metal. And beneath it, something else. A wet, uneven sound like someone trying not to sob. She grabbed the nearest thing with weight a sod pan and approached the hatch. The security panel showed no scheduled access. The camera feed was static, as if the lens couldn't decide what it was seeing. But someone or something was breathing out there. Heavy hitching breaths. A faint whine threaded with grief. Mara thumbed the release. The hatch slid aside with a sigh. A small creature stood in the corridor's dim light, barely hip-high to her. Bronze scales caught the glow of emergency strips. 2 folded wings hugged its back like a child clutching a blanket. Its eyes, green, startlingly bright, were swollen from crying. In its clawed hands was a woven basket packed with purple roots shot through with pale silver filaments. They looked like carrots that had grown up somewhere angry. Mara's grip tightened on the pan. The creature sniffed, swallowed, and spoke in halting common. "Please. You cook. You make food. Good." Mara's mouth was suddenly dry. What are you?" The creature flinched, then lifted the basket with trembling determination. "My mother. She is sick. Very sick. She must eat these." A tear slid down its snout, leaving a glossy track across the scales. "But they taste like dying. She cannot keep them. She vomit. She gets weaker. Please." Mara lowered the pan slowly, set it on the prep counter like an offering, and crouched until they were close to eye level. "Hey," she said, gentle. "Breathe for a second. What's your name?" A shaky inhale. "Saffron." "My name is Saffron." "Okay, Saffron. I'm Mara. Tell me what's happening with your mother." Saffron's claws flexed around the basket handle. "She has scale wasting." The words came out like they hurt. "Her scales turn gray. They break, fall. She gets cold inside. If not treated, she dies." Mara's stomach sank. She'd heard rumors, old pilot stories about Drake clans that lived in the asteroid belts, born in hollow rocks and lit by mineral glow. Most people treated them like myth or nuisance, depending on their politics. And here was one crying in her doorway. "These roots are medicine?" Mara asked. "Yes, argent thistle." Saffron nodded quickly, as if afraid she'd change her mind. "They grow only few worlds. My brother flew long time to find, but mother cannot eat. Too bitter. Too sharp." Saffron's voice cracked. "We have not enough days." Mara lifted one root from the basket. It was dense, heavier than it looked, and cold to the touch despite being in recycled station air. It smelled metallic like pennies and rain-on. Stone. You came to me because—" Mara kept her tone calm even as her mind raced. Saffron's shoulders rose, small wings twitching. "We do not ask other species. It is shame. We are taught to endure. But I do not care about shame. My mother is dying." The green eyes begged without pride. "People say human cooks can make anything taste good. They say you use old ways." "You respect food?" I asked. They pointed, so I came. Mara stared at the basket, then back at the small, shaking Drake. "I don't know your biology," she said carefully. "I don't know what's safe. If I cook this wrong—" "She is already leaving," Saffron whispered. "Worse is no place left." That blunt truth hit Mara like steam. She thought of her own father on Earth, stubbornly refusing the gray hospital broth because it made him gag. Nutrition on a chart, calories available. A body failing anyway because eating felt like punishment. Mara closed her fingers around the root again. "Come back at first cycle," she said, "when the station wakes up. I'll try to make something she can eat." Saffron's face, if you could call it that, lit with terrified relief. "You will?" "I'll try," Mara said, and meant it with a full-body honesty. "That's all I can promise." Saffron lunged forward and hugged her around the waist. The scales were warm. Not slick, not sharp smooth, like river stones that held the sun. "Thank you," Saffron choked. "Thank you." Then the small Drake was gone, wings beating hard, vanishing down the corridor toward the old docking tunnels that led, rumor said, to the asteroid belt. Mara stood in the doorway holding a basket of medicine that smelled like metal and desperation. She locked the hatch and turned back into her silent restaurant. Then she pulled up a chair, woke her terminal, and started searching. By the time station dawn lights brightened from violet to white, Mara's eyes felt filled with sand. The public database had 46 entries about drakes. Most were mining consortium reports. Territory disputes, heat signatures near valuable. Or warnings about non-compliant indigenous fauna that read like a crime against language. Buried between that garbage were scraps that mattered. Drakes required high mineral intake. Their bodies generated internal heat. Their tongues, if you could call the sensory organ a tongue, were laced with conductive tissue that perceived electric gradients and magnetic flow. They didn't just taste chemicals. They tasted charge. Scale wasting was a degenerative breakdown in the metallic microstructure of their dermal plates. It left them brittle, unable to retain heat, vulnerable to organ failure. Argent thistle contained a compound that rebonded those microstructures. The same compound was attached to an alkaloid so bitter that, according to one academic paper, it exceeded human tolerance by orders of magnitude. Mara read that sentence 3 times, then sat back and laughed once, sharp and humorless. No wonder Saffron's mother couldn't eat. Her terminal chimed. A message pinged from a contact she barely knew. Dr. Kian Rell, xenobiologist, station.
Research Division.
She'd served him stew once when the lab cafeteria had flooded. He'd tipped her with actual paper credits, an antique gesture that had made her smile. Kian Rell, are you really trying to cook argent thistle for a drake? Call me. Now. Mara didn't hesitate. His face appeared on the holoscreen, pale with sleeplessness and worry. Tell me you're not about to do something catastrophically illegal. Mara told him everything, Saffron, the sick mother, the basket, the time limit. Kian listened without interrupting. When she finished, he exhaled slowly. You know, if station admin learns you're altering medicinal food, they can shut you down, he said. Unauthorized medical practice. It doesn't matter that you're a chef. Regulations are written by people who fear liability more than death. I know, Mara said, and I'm still going to try. Kian's mouth twitched at one corner. Of course you are. I can't do it blind, Mara added. I need help. I need to know what's in this thing. Send me a sample. Kian said immediately, I'll run a full analysis. If you insist on being brave, I'll at least make sure you're not being foolish. Relief loosened something in Mara's ribs. Thank you. Don't thank me, Kian said. Just don't poison a matriarch and start an interspecies incident. He ended the call, and Mara, still shaking from adrenaline, went into the kitchen and began laying out ingredients like a ritual. Because cooking was chemistry, balance could trick the tongue. Salt could tame bitter. Acid could lift heavy flavors. Fat could soften edges. Heat could transform harshness into depth. But if Drakes tasted electricity, then this wasn't just about molecules. This was about fields. When Kian's analysis arrived, Mara felt the way she did right before a service. Rush. Nervous, focused, hungry for answers. The report confirmed what she feared and what she'd hoped wouldn't be true. The healing compound and the bitter alkaloid were chemically inseparable. Remove one, lose the other. Masking would have to happen without stripping potency. And at the bottom, Kian had added a note, informal, like something scribbled on a napkin. If Drake's taste charge, bitterness may be partly electroperceptive. Consider conductive ingredients. Salt minerals, iron-rich fungi, sea kelp. Build a path for the sensation to travel that isn't straight through their taste receptors. Mara reread that last line until it stopped sounding like nonsense and started sounding like inspiration. A path. A circuit. If the bitter sensation had an electrical component, then maybe the right conductive matrix could redirect it, spread it out, weave it into other signals until it wasn't a single overwhelming spike. She grabbed what she had, iron-fed. Oyster mushrooms from Hydro Bay 3 mineral kelp sheets meant for Quellen Trader's volcanic black salt. Expensive and sharp, a jar of miso she'd fermented herself. Because some habits never died, attempt 1. She seared argent thistle with mushrooms in oil. It became gray sludge and smelled like burnt pennies. She gagged and threw it out. Attempt 2. She tried a cold fermentation with miso and kelp, hoping time would mellow bitterness. It was less violent, still unbearable. And something about it felt wrong in her mouth, not just taste but sensation, like silence where there should have been hum. Attempt 3. She stopped trying to make it palatable to humans. Drakes ran hot. They ate minerals. Heat mattered. She fired up the old clay kiln she used for slow bakes, an indulgence in a station where energy was rationed and most kitchens were sterile boxes with printers. She heated the kill stones until they glowed faintly, then blanched thin strips of argent thistle in heavily salted mineral water, not enough to leach the compound, just enough to wash off surface bite. She layered the strips with iron mushrooms, folded them in fermented kelp, and pressed the bundle into a shallow pan lined with conductive salt crystals. Then she pushed it into the kiln and sealed the door. The scent that rose as it cooked wasn't pleasant at first, sharp, metallic, stubborn. But after a while it shifted, softened, turned earthy. Like rain on warm stone, like deep caves. Mara pulled it out at the first cycle bell when the station's corridors began to fill with commuters. The bundle hissed quietly, radiating heat. She tasted a pinhead-sized piece because she was not stupid and nearly cried. It was still bitter. But it wasn't a knife anymore. It was a thread, braided into something broader: umami, mineral sweetness, charred kelp, mushroom depth. It didn't feel like poison. It felt like a solution. She packed it into a thermal canister, the kind used for hazardous lab samples, because it could hold heat without leaking, and waited by the service hatch. When it rattled, she opened without hesitation. Saffron stood there, eyes wide, wings trembling. "You made something," they whispered. Mara handed over the canister. "Keep it hot. Your mother should eat it while it's still warm." Heat. Matters. Go slow, if she can. Saffron cradled the canister like a fragile star. How much should she? Try a bite, Mara said. Then another. Tell me what happens. Saffron nodded hard, tears gathering again. Thank you. And then Saffron was airborne, vanishing toward the old tunnels. Mara sank onto a prep stool and stared at her quiet dining nook. She had no idea if she'd saved anyone. She just knew she'd tried. Saffron flew like fear gave wings extra strength. The drift through the asteroid belt was a maze of rock and shadow. Their settlement clung inside a hollowed stone the size of a city block carved by claws and time. Crystal veins glowed blue along the tunnels, bioluminescent and calm. At the entrance ledge, someone waited. Saffron's older sibling Brass stood with arms crossed, larger, heavier, scales like polished armor. You went back to the human, Brass said. It wasn't a question. She made food for Mother, Saffron said, landing hard. She stayed up all night. We do not accept help, Brass snapped. Not from them. Father is gone, Saffron shot back, voice breaking. Mother is leaving. I don't care about pride. I care about her breathing tomorrow. Brass's jaw tightened. What did the human demand? Credits? Access? Or rights? Nothing, Saffron said, and watched that word hit. She asked for nothing. Brass stared at the canister. It could be poison. Then Mother is already dying, Saffron said quietly. But if it isn't, it might bring her back. Silence stretched. Then Brass stepped aside. She's awake. She asked for you. They walked the tunnel together. Their mother lay on a platform of warm stone, wings folded like weary curtains. Once she'd been a blaze of bronze gold, a presence that made the air feel smaller. Now her scales were dulled to ash gray, cracked and flaking. Her breath came shallow. My ember, she rasped, voice a soft rumble. You went to the station again. I brought something, Saffron whispered. They opened the canister. Steam lifted, carrying the scent of deep earth and iron. Their mother's nostrils flared. Her eyes sharpened. That is argent thistle, she said, astonished. I can sense the bond compound, but the bite is not. Screaming. The human used mushrooms and kelp and heat, Saffron said quickly. She said it makes a path for the taste, Brass snorted. Humans cannot understand our senses. She tried, Saffron said. Their mother took the smallest bite. Chewed. Saffron's heart hammered, swallowed. One breath, two, then their mother took another bite and another. It tastes, she said softly, stunned, like the old stone caves. Like mineral veins, like home. Saffron's knees went. Weak. Their mother ate until exhaustion forced her to stop half the canister, more than she'd kept down in weeks. Let me sleep, she murmured. Wake me later. I will eat again. They settled her onto the warm stone. And for the first time in days, her breathing evened, not the ragged gasp of someone slipping away, but the steady rhythm of someone resting. Brass stood staring at their mother's scales. They looked a fraction brighter. It was subtle, but it was real. A human did this, Brass whispered, as if the words were dangerous. Saffron nodded. A human helped. Brass sank down onto the tunnel floor, head in hands. I don't know what to do with that. Start with Mother living, Saffron sighed. 3 hours later, Mara's terminal screamed with an emergency summons. Station Administrator Varen wanted her in his office immediately. Saffron heard it too, monitoring open comms the way Drakes did when they were afraid the world was hunting their family. They flew back to Old Light so fast their wings burned. Mara was prepping vegetables that nobody had ordered because prep was what you did when your hands needed purpose. They know, Saffron panted, landing in the kitchen. They say you broke laws. They will shut you down. Mara wiped her hands slowly. I figured. This is my fault, Saffron said, tears gathering. I asked you. You asked. Mara said, firm. I chose. That's the difference. She crouched again, eye level. Promise me something. No matter what happens to my restaurant, you keep bringing the meals. Your mother finishes the treatment. Saffron's throat bobbed. You could lose everything. My place was dying anyway, Mara said, and managed a small smile. At least now it's dying for a reason. The crackdown came exactly like she'd expected. Threats, inspections, paperwork designed to crush. But what Mara hadn't expected was how quickly truth could travel when someone chose to broadcast it. Dr. Kian Reckless infuriatingly principled uploaded the full method to the public knowledge net. Ingredients, process, safety precautions, sensory rationale. Not as a medical treatment, but as culinary technique adapted for Drake physiology. Arresting her changes nothing, Kian declared on open channel. The knowledge is free now. Then others spoke up, station residents she'd fed on bad. Days, dock workers she'd given soup to when their pay was late. A Quellen courier who remembered her refusing to overcharge when the printer cafes had price gouged. Everyone during a supply shortage. Independent reporters sniffed the story like blood in water. Small chef, sick matriarch, corporate regulations used as a bludgeon, a species shoved into dependency. The narrative flipped. Admin Varen tried to posture. It didn't work under the heat of public scrutiny. A sector ethics panel arrived. Lawyers, auditors, medical council reps who hated being embarrassed on record. They investigated. Conclusion: Mara hadn't practiced medicine. She'd prepared food. Adapted flavor. Profiles. Shared a recipe. The warrant dissolved under its own absurdity. The station, suddenly eager to look virtuous, reinstated her license. Admin Varen quietly resigned into a consulting role somewhere far away. And Mara, exhausted and stunned, sat on the floor of her kitchen while Saffron hugged her and sobbed into her apron. You're safe, Saffron whispered. Mara stared at the thermal canisters stacked near the door. I didn't do this to become a symbol, Saffron sniffed. You did it because Mother was dying. Yeah, Mara said hoarsely. That? When the matriarch was strong enough, she summoned Mara, not to the station. To the asteroid settlement. Brass, still wary, still proud, escorted Mara in a small transport pod that hummed with borrowed power. The belt opened around them like a field of sleeping giants. Inside the settlement, crystals painted the tunnels in blue light. Drakes watched from shadowed ledges. Some eyes held curiosity. Some held old anger. Mara kept her posture steady. Remembered Kian's rushed notes on Drake greeting customs. No sudden movements, no direct challenge stance. Hands visible, head lowered just enough to show respect without collapse. They reached the matriarch's cavern. She was upright, scales restored to molten bronze streaked with gold. She radiated heat like a living hearth. Her gaze pinned Mara in place with the weight of centuries. You are Mara Vance, the matriarch said, her voice a vibration in the bones. The human who fed my body when it could not feed itself. Mara bowed, careful. I'm honored to be here. The matriarch studied her. Our tradition demands acknowledgement. You gave me back my strength. Ask for payment. Mara thought of her debt notices, the empty tables, the bitter nights of failure. Then she looked at Saffron alive with relief, no longer a child drowning in helplessness, and at Brass, whose hatred was cracking into something more complicated. I don't want your ore or your credits, Mara said. Silence. I want to learn, she continued, how your people cook, how you taste, what matters at your table. I want to serve drakes who come to the station without guessing. I want food to be a bridge. The matriarch's eyes narrowed then, unexpectedly softened. You ask for knowledge, she rumbled. That is the only payment worthy of a life. She lowered her head until they were close enough that Mara could feel the heat of her breath. But understand this, you eat. With us, you learn our ways, you carry our trust. If you twist it into harm, if you sell it, there is nowhere in the stars you can hide from my fury. Mara swallowed. Fair. The matriarch's mouth curved, a drake version of a smile. Then stay. Eat. Learn. Teach us too. That night, Mara cooked on heated stone, guided by claws and ancient practice. She learned that drakes didn't just season food, they tuned it. Minerals arranged like chords. Heat applied like rhythm. Flavor built as a landscape rather than a point. And when they finally ate together, human and drake sharing a meal without fear, Mara felt something she hadn't felt since leaving Earth. Not success, meaning news travels faster than ships. Within weeks, Old Light wasn't empty anymore. Travelers docked just to try the Drake-safe kill braid. Families sent messages asking for instructions. Chefs across the sector experimented and credited her openly. The station board, ever eager to monetize morality, offered her an expansion permit. The Drake matriarch offered something rarer, protection and partnership. They built a new place on the border between human habitation and the docking ring large enough for mixed species, designed with 2 kitchens, one for human flame and knife, one for drake heat and conductive stone. They didn't call it the bridge. That was too neat. They called it common table. Saffron apprenticed under Mara, fast and hungry for knowledge, learning how to balance not just taste but cultures. Brass ran front service with surprising grace, greeting visitors with a measured warmth that made everyone breathe easier. Kian became an on-call consultant, showing up with data and stealing bites like a thief with a conscience. And some nights, when the last customer left and the station lights dimmed, Mara stood at the service hatch and remembered the first rattle, the first sobbing breath on the other side of metal. One small request. One exhausted cook who said yes. Anyway, everything that followed wasn't magic. It was just what happens when someone treats need like it matters more than pride. When you feed the person in front of you. When you build a path through bitterness, through fear so something, healing can make it to the center. And on a station built of recycled air and distant stars, that was enough to start changing the shape of the world.